Yes, and yesterday the ruling party did indeed launch its election manifesto and promise South Africans that they have identified those 6 priorities with which they will work on implementing should they remain in power after May the 29th. Now, among those was the promise to deal with the high cost of living that has seen households stretched far beyond their means. This even though the average cost for the household food basket has decreased, however, with no significant impact for those in dire straits. Mervyn Abrahams, a program coordinator at the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group, joins us now to shed some more light on this grim situation. Mervyn, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. Look, the impact on the poor with the rising cost of living is actually becoming quite unbearable. And even with these pronounced decreases, this really doesn't have the necessary impact. You've heard the reactions from the various political parties as well as economists across the country to the budget as well as the manifesto launched by the ANC yesterday. So what is your comment on this, sir?
So good evening to you, Alicia, and good evening to all your viewers. Yes, I mean, the cost of living in South Africa far outstrips the ability of the majority of South Africans to survive. So seen, for instance, and of course, food prices is the major contributor to CPI inflation in South Africa. So bringing down food prices would be one step in the right direction. Now, we have seen our basket come down slightly over the month of February. So it's come down by almost 1%, and the cost of the basket now stands at 5,277 Rand. We also know that commodity prices of food has fallen dramatically over the last year. We also know that load shedding premium are already calculated into the prices of most of the goods and services that we buy. So in the light of that, we expect that food price inflation will probably cool as we move throughout the year.
Mervyn, look, the ANC president yesterday announced that as priority number 3, they intend to deal with this high cost of living by basically addressing issues like, as you've just mentioned, price fixing, as well as an exemption on essential items. Firstly, is this feasible? And secondly, do you think it will make a significant impact in addressing these challenges across the spectrum?
So essentially, the major issue that would actually deal with the issue around cost of living is, in fact, wage levels. So it is about job creation, creating jobs. It is about decent wages. It is about decent wage increases. Because we must remember we live in a globalized world. Some of the factors that lead to increases, for instance, in the area of food prices, are beyond our control. If fertilizer prices increase, then it increases for us. If the rand versus the dollar decreases, then it impacts. So it's about really allowing or having a situation where South African households work, where they bring in an income that is decent, where they are able to save so that they can actually withstand times of high inflation and times of cost of living crises. And this is where South Africa's economy is extremely weak.
But Mervyn, look, the ruling party has been in power for the past 30 years, and these issues like job creation were part of the initial campaign trail as long ago. It's absolutely disturbing that such challenges are still prevalent, let alone in their worst form. So what do you make of this conundrum, and where is the party going to magically create these jobs from?
So that is precisely the issue that I would like to know, Alicia. For 30 years, we have seen our industrialization process, which the ANC now says they're going to reindustrialize. Well, we were industrialized. It was already in 1994 that we were told by the WTO we could hold on to some of our tariff restrictions from the post-apartheid period. And no, the ANC said, let's enter the globalized, let's do as the rest of the global economy did. And of course, what that was bloodbath in terms of job losses and losses of industries. So we've seen this collapse happen under the watch of the ANC, and I would like to believe that the ANC is now serious to actually deal with questions such as reindustrialization, because that will create jobs, investing in infrastructure, getting Transnet going, because we have trucks standing. You know, if you travel through Richards Bay and you see the kilometers levels of trucks waiting to get into the Richards Bay Harbour, and the Richards Bay Harbour cannot process all of it, those are all money lost to the economy. And so we really have to start fixing that if we are to fix the whole issue around poverty, inequality, and the household affordability crisis.
And very quickly, Mervyn, I mean, it has been said that the ruling party really does not even have money for the promises that it's currently making. So one wonders if then there's a solid plan that can actually translate into action to champion the needs of the most vulnerable people in this country.
So there is the possibility of getting the finances. I think what we need is, number one, political will to deal with it, and number two, the level of competence that can actually execute those plans. If we have those two in place, there are other means of drawing in the resources, as the Minister of Finance has done with the latest budget by dipping into our gold reserves.
And then very quickly, Mervyn, do you have with you the statistics in terms of how many people in this country are actually living below the poverty line?
So we have something in the region of almost about 40% of South Africans living within the or below the poverty line. So 55% of South Africans live under the poverty line. About 25% live under the food poverty line, which is absolutely unbelievable. And then if you look at it from a racial point of view, then 64% of Black South Africans live under the upper bound poverty line. And that's an area where we really need to focus on.
And when we're talking about this poverty line, Mervyn, I mean, let's talk about that. What are we looking at? I mean, we know there's a high number of grant beneficiaries, people that literally live and rely on these grants, and the number has since been surging. So let's talk about that. What are we looking at? Are these people that literally do not have jobs, cannot put food on the table, and have no means of actually making money?
So it's two types of scenarios. The first scenario is that we've got an unemployment rate of almost 40%.
Yeah.
So most of those who need to depend on the state are part of that 40%. But then there is another scenario, and that is of low wages. So an example, for instance, for the last month, the national minimum wage would have brought in something like 4,500 rand. 60% of that 4,500 would have gone to transport and electricity. That would have left something in the region of 1,683 rand. Divided in a household of 4 leaves you with something like 420 rand, while the food poverty line is at 760. So it's almost 400 rand below the food poverty line. And that is also where, for instance, the value of the child support grant becomes important, because those families should be able to access that grant, because we should be focusing on our children and investing in proper nutrition for our children, because that also is critical in the long-term economic growth and productivity of the country when those children enter the labor force.
Mervyn, thank you so much for your contribution there. That is Mr. Mervyn Abrahams, who's a program coordinator at the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group.